Hello. In this movie, we're going to start off by just taking a look at this hard drive that you will be receiving if you haven't already gotten it. And this is a small portable USB 2 drive, and we're going to unbox it and take a look at that real quick. And then once we've done that, we're going to take a look at what's on board this drive, which has the entire Swing Thing library and also a little application that'll help you to search through the database, if you'd like to use it. So let's start by unpackaging this. Take a look. Let's see what's inside. So we'll just open it up. Alright. So the first thing we'll look at is the drive itself. There's our drive, and it's a nice little USB drive, USB 2, and I've already labeled it, so it says Swing Thing HD Files on it, and this is the drive that you'll use to move everything into iTunes with, and then once you put it into iTunes, then you'll be able to go through them there and then ultimately move them up onto your iPod. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to disconnect this drive, and you won't need it again unless you want to go into iTunes and maybe change some of the selections that you're going to put on your iPod. Otherwise, you can just package this back up in its box, put it in a safe place, and it'll be there if you need it. Now let's just take a look at this. There's a little port right here, and that port is where you're going to plug in the USB cable. It's a little mini USB plug, and we'll take a look at the cord that came with this here. So let me just set this aside for the moment, and when you look under this, there's a few other items to note. One of them is this disc. Now you don't need this. If you were on a PC, on some kind of a regular old PC, then yeah, you'd need this, but on a Macintosh you don't. So we'll just set that aside. Here's your registration card, so you'll want to fill that out and send it in. Comes with a really nice little slip-in case so that you can keep your drive well protected. And then there's this cord, and we're going to look at that. Now this down here is just a little advertising that came with, so we'll just move that out of the way. Alright, let's look at this cord closely, because you may be a little off-put by it when you first look at it. Set this aside. Alright. Now at one end you just got this little mini plug, and this is what will go into the portable drive itself. At the other end, however, you've got this arrangement. So what this is it takes its power from the USB ports on your computer. So you need to free up a couple of those USB ports and plug both of these in while you're using the drive, because it can't get enough power from one of those plugs to run the drive, so it actually takes it from two, and that's why it's got both of these. Okay, well, let's go ahead and hook everything up here and we'll get going. Now I'll just go ahead and I'm going to plug these into an external USB port that I've got, but you could just plug them right into your laptop. Then we're going to take this cord here and we're going to plug it into this little spot right here. So I'll do that. And you'll see you get a little light and you can feel it spinning up. So I'm just going to set this aside now, and you can see that the drive has mounted on the desktop right there. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a close look at this now. I'll go ahead and double click on this external hard drive icon so we can see what's inside. Just double click, and basically there's two things. There's a folder and there's this. Now this is a little application that I'm including that will help you to search through the database. We'll take a look at this at the end of our little presentation here. And by the way that I'm laying this out will be more or less in the order of things that you'll probably want to do. So if you roll your mouse, just roll your cursor over this movie, as soon as you get the cursor over the movie that's playing right now, you'll get a little window that pops out on the left, and that's got chapter markers. And as if you want to jump back or if you want to jump ahead at any time, you can just go to that and click on one of those chapter markers, and that'll just jump you to that position in the movie and let it keep playing from there. So you can jump ahead or back anytime you want. Alright, let's take a look inside of our SwingThing HD library and see what's inside. Alright, right now we're in folder view, and I'm going to, I think for now what I'll do is I'll just go into the column view. So here we're looking inside of the folder that we just saw, the SwingThing HD library folder. And inside of that are all these subfolders, and there are a lot of them. In fact, there's going to be about 600 or so of these. Some of them only have one show in them, and others will have more than one show. Now, you could come in here and you can look and see what's in here. Each one of these has a show title. If I expand this out a little bit here, you can see that this has got a couple of shows in it, and when I look inside of that, it shows all of the different segments of the show. You don't really have to worry about this. I'm just showing you this so you'll know what's in here. But there are a great number of these, as you can see from the little scrolly thing that's moving down here. And when I scroll this down, there are a lot of these folders. Alright, we're not going to worry about those for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here, and let's just go back into icon view. Alright, I have to go back one. Let's come down here. Go like that. Alright. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this over to the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and launch iTunes. So I'll come down here, there's the iTunes icon, and I'll click that. And this is the first, if this is the first time you've ever launched iTunes, this is what you'll see. Just an Apple agreement, and you can read it if you want, but I would just click agree myself. And then here's iTunes, and this is what it looks like when the first time that you open it up. Let's scooch this over a bit. I'm going to use my iPad as a way of demonstrating what will happen when you hook up your iPod, but we'll come to that part in a minute. The first thing I want to do, though, is I would like to set up iTunes the way I want it to be set up, and this is the way that you should probably start yourself. So when you've got iTunes running, just go up here to the iTunes menu up in the left and choose Preferences. And then, alright, so that's fine. Now let's just go through these real quickly and just make sure that you know what these are about. What you can do is you can tell iTunes that you want the library to show certain things over here on the left. For example, music and movies and TV shows. Now it's just assumed that you want to have music, so you don't have that choice. But you'll notice movies is right there. If I didn't want to ever use movies on this, I could just uncheck this, and then when I click OK, movies is gone from the list. So it just hides them, hides that part. But we're going to keep this for now. So I'm just going to leave this more or less with these default settings. I will tell you that Ping and iTunes DJ and Genius are probably not ones that you'll need, and so if you want to remove some clutter, you can just uncheck those. And then let's just down here, when you insert an audio CD, like if you've got a collection of CDs and you want to bring them into iTunes, this would automatically open iTunes and ask if you want to import the contents of that into your iTunes library. So you can leave that as is, or you can change it to whatever you want. I'll just leave that to you. Alright, moving along here, we've got playback, and for all intents and purposes you can just leave these settings alone. The same is true for sharing. And the Apple Store, once you click on the iTunes Store, you'll need to, if you haven't already created an account, create an account with them. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to purchase music and books. They have both audio books and also books that you can read on your computer. And it will also allow you to buy music if you want and load it, and it'll put it right into your iTunes library, and then you can burn it to CD or do whatever you want. You can ignore the parental settings here. You can look at that on your own. And we'll ignore devices for now. Let's just go straight over to advanced. And what I would suggest you do while we're working with this folder and bringing it into iTunes is to uncheck this button. This is a very important, or a checkbox. It's very important that you uncheck that. Here's why. You have limited space on your hard drive, and you may not want to actually copy all of these into your computer's hard drive. By unchecking this box, what you're doing is telling iTunes that instead of making a copy of these and moving them over onto your computer's hard drive, it will expect these always to be on this external hard drive, this external one, this little mini one that I gave you. It will expect them to be there after you've dragged them into iTunes. So really what it's going to do is it's just going to index the contents of this folder and leave it on that hard drive. That way you don't add extra clutter to your computer. Now this little drive will have to be plugged in whenever you're going to use iTunes to change the contents of your iPod, but otherwise you don't even need this little drive to be plugged in. If it's not plugged in and you go into iTunes, you'll find that it just won't know where anything is. Anything that you brought in from this folder. Anything else that you bring in, it would know about, but it wouldn't know about that. So what I recommend doing is uncheck this box, and then later on, if you decide you're going to use iTunes more, you may at that time decide that you want to, let's say, copy the contents of a CD into iTunes, for example. Then you'll probably want to check this box again. And then that way anything that you bring in after that box is checked will actually be put into the iTunes music folder, which is a good idea for things that you're going to copy off of CD, things like that. But for this Swing Thing library, since you're only going to need it in iTunes when you want to move files onto your iPod, don't worry about the necessity of having to put those on your computer. We'll just uncheck this box, and that way it won't actually copy anything over. It'll just read what's on this hard drive in this folder, and that's all. So I'm just going to click OK. Alright, so now that we have that unchecked, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click and drag this folder right up into this little area here, and you'll see what happens when I do. So watch as I do this. Click and drag. You see how you get a blue highlight up there, and you can just drop it anywhere inside that blue rectangle, and once you do, it'll begin the process of indexing the contents of this folder. Now it's going to take a little while to complete this process. It takes probably about 5 or 10 minutes. It would take a lot longer, by the way, if you were actually copying the files off of the external hard drive and putting them into iTunes, because then it would have to pull everything off and save it onto your hard drive. So it would probably take a couple of hours to do that. But this will only take about 5 or 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause this movie, and when this is done, I'll come back. Okay, so it's done moving everything or indexing everything, and at this point you'll see all of the shows listed here in the big window. Now what you're going to notice up here is that iTunes is taking a look on the internet to see if it can find any album artwork. Now it just does this automatically, and so you really don't need that up there, so just ignore it. Let it go ahead and finish its thing, because otherwise it'll keep trying to do it until it finally gets a chance to look at everything. But just ignore it. It's not going to affect any of the things that we're doing. It's just going to work in the background. Now, by the way, over here this iTunes sidebar has this ping thing. You don't need that, so you can just click on hide sidebar like that. Okay, so we've got a library in here, and let's just look at the basic structure of things. Now I can click, you see how if I roll my mouse up here on the top over these little dividers that I can kind of resize stuff. I'll just go ahead and do that for a moment so you can kind of see what's in here. Alright, and maybe while I'm at it, let's make this window a little smaller to kind of fit in this this movie that you're watching a little bit better. Alright, so basically what you're looking at is an icon for the shows, and this is the same icon for every one of these shows. And then here's the show number, and it's preceded with a 0 when it's only a 3-digit number, but that isn't going to really be an issue, because as you can see here, the show is broken up into, well, this one is broken up into 8 segments, this one is broken up into 9 segments here, like that. And each one of these segments always ends with Fred giving a verbal cue to the radio stations where they can stop the show and run some spots and then come back. And so once all these shows are moved onto your iPod, these will show up as tracks, and it will treat each one of these shows as an album. So these would be tracks within the album. Now there's a number of different ways of viewing things up here. Right now we're just looking at the entire collection. You can see down here it says that there are 8,637 songs. That means each one of these segments is a song to iTunes. It would take you 33.2 days if you were listening around the clock to hear every show. So basically a month of 24 hours, 7-day-a-week listening. And the total size of the library is 55.31. So that's what we're looking at here now. But you can also do a search. You can use the search window right up here. And if I wanted to type in something, let's just say, oh, I don't know, let's try clarinet. And now what you're going to see is a list with 43 songs, and that's basically represented here by this short number of albums, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so there are 5 shows where there's the word clarinet somewhere in the title. So that gives you a shorter list. Now another way you can do a search, and sometimes this is a little bit handier, let's just go ahead and click this little X here. I'm going to go back here and you'll see that there's these icons up here. When you click on this one, it shows you all of the segments in all of the shows. When you click on this one, it shows you the album and the tracks in the album. When you click on this one, here it shows you icons. Now this is a large number of icons, just like before. Each one is a show. But here you've got these buttons, and these buttons will help you to locate things that you're interested in. For example, you'll notice each one of these has a show number, and it then is followed, or it would be if it didn't run out of space, it would give you the show name. But if you want, just click on the artist button. Then it will break out the shows based upon the show theme. So these are guest shows. You can see Al Hurt, Alvino Ray. These are shows that have interviews. Now here, look at this, Artie Shaw, and underneath it says 11 albums. So there's a lot of shows about Artie Shaw where Artie was interviewed. And if I double click on this icon, you can see that each album is now presented in here, so you can look at it and then decide if you want to play it or not. Let's say I wanted to play this one here. I could just go to the first track, and again you can resize these columns if you want, and You also might be interested in looking at this album column because this gives you more information about what's on the show. And you can just click on any one of these rows, double click it.
Anyone with a reputation in the catalog of hits.
And as you can see, it's going to start playing that show. So I'll turn the volume down there. So that's how you would begin playing that album, and when this track ends it would automatically segue right into the next one until it reached the end of the album, and then it would stop. Okay, now to go back to our search, I'll just click up here. This will show us all the artists because we chose artists. We can also look at genres. We've got one genre because this is all we put in here are Swing Thing shows. And so here there are 993 albums or 993 shows, and they're all in here. And if I double click this, it would list them all just like it would do here or here. Under composers, Fred Hall's Swing Thing. So if you had other material that you put on here from CD or something that was also in the swing genre, that way it wouldn't show up under it wouldn't show up under genres. It would show up as big band. Under composers you would see Fred Hall Swing Thing as a separate segment, and other things would be listed here. Alright, so that's enough about navigating around inside of iTunes. Now what we're going to do is come down to the fun part. This is where the rubber meets the road. Now I don't have an iPod, so I'm going to plug in my iPad instead. So I'm going to plug that into the computer right now. And when I do that, I want to tell this not to synchronize. So I'm going to wait for this to come up. The iPad is synced with another iTunes library. Do you want to erase this iPad and sync with this? And the answer is no, I do not. So I'll just click on cancel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to the music section, and you can look at these others yourself, but for the iPod or the iPad you want to go into the music section here, and here is where you can specify what it is that you want to do. Now as you can see, sync music is unchecked right now. I strongly recommend that after everything has been moved onto the iPad or iPod, that you uncheck this box so that it's like it is now. That way it won't accidentally try and pull the contents of the iPod back over into iTunes, because if it does that, at that point it will actually copy the actual show files into your computer's hard drive, and that will take up a lot of space. So I recommend not doing that. But when we want to move everything over, we do need to have this selected. So I'm going to select it, and instead of telling it to sync the entire music library, I'm going to click down here and I'm going to say include selected playlists, artists, and albums. And for now I'll just turn off the music videos and voice memos, but if you don't have those it doesn't really matter. So now here's how things are laid out. Once we've checked this box and told it that we want to be able to select the albums or playlists or genres that we're interested in, you'll then see here a series of boxes. Each one has lists in them. So for example, under artists here, these are all of the show themes, and so which we saw when we clicked on the when we were looking at the music library in the icon view up here, and we told it to display things by artist. So here we're looking at the same list. Now if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that we've got the big band genre in the library, and then we've got albums, and these are all the actual shows, and there are lots of them. Now you could come through here and select anything you want to put on your iPod. simply by checking a box here and a box there and a box here and a box there until you go through all 1,000 shows, leaving out the ones you don't want to watch. That's not the way I would recommend doing this. There are too many shows. What I would do is assume that you're going to want the majority of them, so you want a way of selecting all of these at once, and then you can go through and selectively uncheck the ones that you don't want put onto the iPod. And the way you do that is when I click on this here, I'm going to hold down the Command key and click on any one of these boxes, doesn't matter which one, while holding down the Command key, and that will tell the Mac to select everything. Just like that. Now you can come through and you can say, well, I'm not interested in Alvino and I'm not interested in Andy Russell and any of the others. So you make your selections. And once you are happy with your selections, then you can click the Apply button, and what that will do is that will begin the process of moving everything from the computer, and really it's not on the computer, it's still sitting over here on the portable hard drive, but it will move everything from the portable hard drive that you have checked here up onto the iPod. And once it's done doing that, then it'll all be on the iPod, and you'll still have your copy here of the full library. So even if you didn't move everything over, you'll still be able to know that you'll have a full unabridged version of the library sitting on this external hard drive. And it's at this point that if you want, you can disconnect the external hard drive. But let me just show you what would happen if you do, and then you come back into iTunes. So I'm not actually going to move any of these over, and in fact I'm going to come back, I'm going to scroll back up to the top here, and I'm going to turn off the sync music option. And then what I'm going to do is, just to play it safe, I'm going to disconnect the iPad. I did that by just clicking that little box. I didn't mean to click it, but I just rolled over on the right side of where it said the iPad, or in your case an iPod, and just tapped it, and then that actually removes the iPad from iTunes for the moment. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, let's just come in here and just take a look in here, and as I showed you before, you can choose to play anything you want. Now at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to unmount this external hard drive. So here it is down here on the left, and I'm using the Lion operating system. If you're not using Lion, you'll probably find this up at the top of the list rather than the bottom of the list. But you'll see it. It says Swing Thing HD Files. Just click on this little icon right here, and then that will take the drive out of the system. Now once you've done that, you can come back over to your drive right here and just unplug it from the computer, and then you can also put the cord away and put it back in its box and keep it safe until another day. Now with this removed from the computer, if I try to play one of these songs now, it's going to tell me that that could not be used because the original file could not be found. I could say locate, but it ain't going to find it because the drive is disconnected. However, if I wanted to quit out of iTunes, and then we'll just to make sure that you know how this is done, I'm going to plug this back in here, and then I'm also going to plug those two connectors back into the USB ports so that the drive will remount. Okay, so you can see the little light is running, and you can see on the screen that we've got this again. All I have to do at this point is relaunch iTunes, I'll come back in here, and when I try and play one of these,
We showcase one of the great clarinetists.
It'll know how to find it again. So that's what you need to do. That way you don't always have to drag everything over back into iTunes. Okay, well, that's the basics, and that should be enough to get you started. This has been a fairly long tutorial. Remember, move your mouse over the movie anytime you want and choose from the chapter selectors on the left to jump to the sections that you would like to review. Okay, Tom, I hope you have fun with this, and if you haven't already gotten the drive, it'll be there shortly. I'll be sending it out tomorrow.